The desert sun climbed higher, burning away the chill of night and casting long, sharp shadows across the broken range. The corporal moved cautiously alongside Wren, his rifle ready, but his eyes constantly on her. She carried the Barrett with an ease that defied the weapon's weight. Her movements fluid, precise, each step measured as if the sand itself parted for her. He had seen her handle impossible situations before, but something about the stillness of the morning carried a tension he could not shake. The men around them were tense, their faces pale from adrenaline and disbelief, every one of them aware that they were witnessing skill beyond comprehension. Bullets fired in the distance had missed their marks, but Wren anticipated each. Movement with the certainty of someone who had lived through countless missions. The corporal glanced down at her medal, 305 kills gleaming in the sunlight, a lifetime of precision and survival etched into metal. He wanted to ask about the kills, about the stories behind each one. But her gaze never left the horizon. The first sign of movement was subtle at first, a flicker along the distant ridge, then another, and then more figures emerging from the sand shadows moving faster. Then human reflexes. The corporal shouted for his men to take positions, but Wren raised a hand, signaling wait. She had already calculated. Distances, angles, wind drift, every factor invisible to them all. The first figure lunged from the ridge almost. Silently, its movement deliberate, unnatural. The men fired wild rounds, but their bullets fell short. The corporal ducked instinctively, feeling panic rise, but Wren remained composed, the Barrett roaring a single round, the figure collapsing into sand. Before it completed its stride, another appeared, and she fired again. Two more figures went down in precise, measured shots. The desert seemed to bend around her focus, around her command, and the men realized they were no longer in control. The corporal stepped closer, trying to comprehend the impossible. She whispered softly, adjusting for wind and elevation, and the shots continued, each round a heartbeat in the desert, each impact a story of survival and training and experience. The shadows faltered, under her precision, retreating only to surge again like waves testing her resolve, each figure falling as if erased by the barrel of her rifle. He swallowed hard, the magnitude of what they were witnessing pressing down on him. Then the tremor came. The ground shaking faintly beneath their boots, a low metallic groan echoing across the range. The men froze, looking to Wren for direction. She rose slightly, scanning the horizon, her eyes sharp, calculating the next impossible move. The shadows surged. From both sides, faster, more coordinated, and the desert seemed alive with memory of past missions of those who had disappeared long ago. They moved as one, a force remembering what had been done to them. The corporal fired instinctively, but the bullets were useless. The figures dodged with impossible grace. He felt fear ripple through him. For the first time that night, Wren fired again, the Barrett cracking each shot, precise, deadly, and absolute, every target faltering and disappearing into sand, dust, and shadow. The desert echoing the rhythm of her past missions, every number on her medal, a mark of experience and survival, and every shadow, a reminder that the desert never forgets. She lowered the rifle briefly, catching her breath, adjusting the scope for the next wave. The men behind him watched silently in awe, their hearts pounding with adrenaline and disbelief. He realized the legend of 305 kills was not just a record. It was a warning, a measure of what happens when skill meets survival instinct, when memory and focus become a weapon, the desert itself bending to her control. Suddenly, a louder rumble shook the range, sand and debris tumbling from the rocks. The corporal instinctively crouched, his men scattered, seeking cover. But Wren did not flinch. She adjusted the Barrett, her fingers tracing angles, distances, wind calculations in seconds. The shadows surged forward again, faster, more coordinated, as if learning from each previous strike the corporal felt. The cold certainty that they were witnessing the culmination of her entire career, each mission a layer building into the force she had become. He stepped forward, finally unable to contain his curiosity. "The medal," he said, pointing at it. 305 kills. She met his gaze briefly, without words, then adjusted the rifle and fired the next round. With the calm certainty of someone who had done this hundreds of times, the figure crumpled the desert, falling silent again. But the tension remained, the wind whispering across the sand, carrying echoes of past operations, the ghosts of missions long gone, and the shadow of what was still to come. The corporal understood then that the desert was alive, and Wren was its agent, a force trained. By history and blood, each shot a response, each calculation a measure of control, and the medal on her chest was more than recognition. It was a testament to choice, precision, and survival. He swallowed hard, the sun climbing higher, casting a pale light across the sand, and he knew the danger was not over, that the desert would test them again, and she would rise to meet it. As the men regrouped, Wren stood scanning the horizon, every sense alert, every calculation ready. She lowered the Barrett, finally her breathing. Even the corporal noticed the slight tremor in her hands, as if the weight of every mission, every kill still lingered, but she did not speak, only motioned to move forward. The desert silent around them except for the faint hum of shifting sand and the whisper of what was still waiting along the distant ridge, and he knew without words that the next encounter would demand everything they had, and more than any man could endure. The desert sun climbed high, burning the sand until it shimmered like liquid metal. The corporal moved carefully, following Wren, her figure small, yet commanding against the endless dunes, the men behind them wary and silent, their rifles ready but their eyes constantly on her she carried. The Barrett effortlessly scanning the horizon, as if reading secrets hidden in the wind and rocks, the medal on her chest glinting in the sunlight. 305 kills, marking a history that none of them could comprehend. He watched her breathe. Slow and controlled every motion, deliberate, measured, precise, as if the desert itself moved in response to her will. He had seen her handle impossible situations before, but now the scale of it hit him. The shadows that had come from the ridge were only a prelude. The desert itself seemed alive, with memory echoing the missions of the past and the choices she had made. The corporal swallowed hard, realizing that each number on her medal was a story of survival, of calculation, of lives ended or saved. They reached a narrow canyon where the heat shimmered in waves across jagged rock formations. Wren paused, scanning the area, her eyes narrowing, calculating distances and angles. He could see her fingers brushing over the Barrett, as if feeling the pulse of the desert itself. The men hesitated. She did not move until she whispered, "The targets are here," and the shadows emerged from the rocks, more figures than before, moving with unnatural precision, coordinated and relentless. The corporal felt his pulse quicken. He raised his rifle instinctively, but she motioned. Hold, her voice calm like a command. The men froze as she fired the first shot, the bullet echoing across the canyon, the nearest figure faltering, then collapsing. The next followed, and the next, each round hitting perfectly calculated points, the desert seeming to bend to her will. Each shot a heartbeat, a history repeating itself. The men watched in awe and fear, their own bullets useless against the precision and skill she embodied. The figures surged again, faster, more coordinated, the ground trembling beneath them, dust and rock shifting under their movement. The corporal ducked behind cover, his heart hammering, but Wren remained absolute calm, her eyes scanning, adjusting. Every calculation in an instant, each shot finding its mark, the desert echoing with the rhythm of her past missions. The corporal realized that the 305 kills were not just numbers, but warnings etched in metal and memory, and now the desert demanded their proof once more. She fired again and again, the barrel kicking under her hands, each impact precise, devastating, absolute. The shadows faltered, then fell away, retreating into sand and dust. The desert silent for a heartbeat, then more shapes appeared. This time, from higher up the rocks, the corporal knew they were dealing with more than human speed, more than ordinary coordination. Each movement rehearsed by memory and terror, the metal on her chest gleaming in the light, a measure of skill earned through impossible circumstances. He stepped closer, finally compelled to ask the question, "The metal 305 kills each one earned. How could you?" He whispered, his voice barely carrying. She glanced at him briefly without breaking aim. Everyone counted. Everyone remembered, she said softly, her eyes returning to the horizon. The desert alive with echoes of missions long past, each shadow a ghost, each bullet a memory. And he understood that she was not just defending herself. They were witnessing history in motion. Suddenly the ridge above them shifted, the ground trembling more violently, sand and rock cascading down the slopes. The men instinctively ducked. Wren remained focused, her hands steady, adjusting the rifle. The shadows surged from above, descending faster than ever, the desert alive and testing her once more. Each shot she fired precise, unstoppable, and the corporal felt awe, fear, and disbelief intertwining the metal, a reminder of what had come before, and what she would do again if necessary. The first figure from the high ridge lunged impossibly fast. Wren fired once and it crumpled. The next shot, another figure faltered, then the next, the desert itself, sea. The sun hung low over the desert, casting long shadows across the sand, the wind stirring faint trails of dust into the air. The corporal and his men crouched behind the wrecked crates, the horizon shimmering with heat and uncertainty. Their eyes locked on the distant ridge where movement had been detected. Wren remained calm, her hands resting lightly on the Barrett, her gaze scanning the horizon like she had done 1,000 times before. He watched her shift her weight slightly, adjusting. Her stance, the barrel of the rifle pointed toward the ridge, her breathing slow and deliberate. She whispered distances and angles under her breath, numbers he could barely comprehend, yet every syllable carried the certainty of experience he felt. A chill run down his spine, knowing the legends on her metal were not exaggeration. They were the measured reality of a soldier forged in fire. The first shadow emerged, a thin figure moving across the rocks. It halted mid-stride, scanning the desert. Its posture stiff yet deliberate, the corporal signaled the men to hold fire. Wren remained still, her eyes never leaving the target. She spoke softly to herself, aligning the scope and adjusting for wind drift. The first round cracked like thunder. Over the dunes, the distant figure jerked once and collapsed, the sand erupting faintly around it. The men around him stared open-mouthed. Another figure appeared, and then another. The ridge was alive with shapes, moving faster than human reflexes. Corporal felt his pulse hammering in his ears. His men raised their rifles, firing rounds that seemed to bounce harmlessly off the shifting shadows, but Wren remained absolute in her calm. She squeezed the trigger once, then twice, each shot finding its mark precise, deadly, and impossibly fast, each impact leaving the figures faltering, then disappearing into the sand like smoke carried by the wind. He could barely keep track of the targets, they moved unpredictably. Yet she anticipated every step, her hands steady, her eyes unwavering. The metal glinted in the last rays of sunlight, and he realized it had nothing to do with pride or fame. It was a record of survival, of choices made under fire, of bullets pulled and lives saved. Her calm was not arrogance. It was discipline honed by blood and memory. The men whispered to one another in awe, yet fear their rifles useless against the shadows that kept advancing. He stepped closer to Wren, wanting to understand what he had underestimated, what he had been unprepared for. She glanced at him briefly without breaking aim. "They are not alive?" She said, her voice low, almost a whisper, but carrying over the wind. What she meant became horrifyingly clear. The shadows were remnants, echoes of missions long past soldiers who had disappeared lost to the desert, to classified operations now returning, as if remembered by the sand itself. The first figure lunged from the ridge, moving faster than any human. The corporal felt his chest tighten, instinctively raising his weapon, but she was already ahead of him. The Barrett cracked again, a sharp report that echoed across the desert. The figure collapsed, but before it hit the sand, another appeared behind it, and she twisted her body, firing. Again, the shots ringing out precise and deliberate, the echoes of 305 kills coursing through each round, as if the desert itself acknowledged her skill. He stumbled back, ducking behind a crate, heart hammering, trying to comprehend how one person could control the battlefield with nothing but a rifle, and calm her eyes, never wavered, scanning the horizon, adjusting angles, calculating distances faster than he could follow, every shot hitting a target he could not see. She was a force both deadly and disciplined, a living testament to every mark on her medal. Suddenly, the shadows surged from both sides, the desert filling with movement more unnatural than before. The men panicked, their fire scattered and wild, but Wren did not move. She remained, composed, lining up the impossible. She whispered for the wind, for the distance, for the shot, and then she fired the first round, sliced through the air, hitting a figure before it could fully emerge. The others faltered, and the men watched in awe. She fired again and again, the rifles booming over the sand, a deadly rhythm the corporal could not comprehend, each impact leaving the shadows faltering, then dissipating into dust. The desert seemed to hold its breath around her, the echoes of missions, long past, mingling with the present, each kill precise. Calculated and final, he felt the weight of her gaze, though she had never looked directly at him. She was aware of every move, every heartbeat around her. The last shadow fell, and silence descended. The desert empty, except for the hum of wind through twisted metal and broken crates. Wren lowered the Barrett, her breathing steady as ever. The corporal finally moved forward, his voice rough from dust and shock. "I cannot believe what I just saw." He gestured toward the metal. "It is real," she said calmly. "Every one of them. Every single one. The desert remembers the choices made and the shots taken, and for a moment he felt the enormity of it all. Then the wind shifted, carrying with it a faint metallic hum, something far beyond the ridge, a reminder that the desert was not done with them, that the past was never truly gone. Wren stood, her silhouette sharp against the fading sun. She adjusted the rifle one last time, scanning the horizon. The corporal knew instinctively that what they had faced was only the beginning, that the mountain, the sand, and the echoes of missions long past had not yet released its hold on her or the desert. He swallowed hard, realizing that the 305 kills on her medal were more than numbers. They were warnings, and the desert had more stories to tell, waiting for the right moment, for the right shot. And as the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, a distant rumble rose from the ridge, a reminder that their battle was not yet over, and the corporal felt a cold certainty that the next moment would demand everything they had learned and more than any man could endure. The desert night fell quickly, and the shadows lengthened across the broken range. The corporal crouched behind a rusted crate. His rifle raised, the men around him, tense, their eyes flicking to the horizon, where the faint glow of moonlight caught on jagged rocks. Wren remained calm, kneeling behind her. Barrett, her fingers steady on the stock, her eyes scanning the dark as if reading secrets hidden in the wind and sand. He watched her breathe, slow, and controlled the way her body moved with patience and precision, like she was connected to the desert itself. And then, the first figure emerged, moving silently along the ridge, impossible speed and unnatural posture. The men froze, their bullets firing wildly, but the figure dodged them with grace that made the corporal's chest tighten. Wren whispered a range, and the first round left the barrel, striking the figure mid-stride. It collapsed into dust before it hit the sand. Another followed, then another, the ridge alive with shapes shifting through shadows faster than human reflexes. The men panicked, firing into the dark, but Wren remained focused, her shots landing each time, precise, unstoppable. The corporal realized that the legend on her medal was not just history, it was reality. She was lethal, and she had been forged by circumstances that no one could. Understand every kill counted, every calculation. Exact the desert itself bending to her will. He wanted to step closer to assist to understand the impossible, but her eyes flicked to him a warning stay. He whispered to himself, her hand tightening, on the trigger, and he obeyed, frozen by awe and fear. The shadows moved in waves, coordinated and deliberate, each one anticipating the men's moves, yet faltering under her precision. She fired again, each round a heartbeat, a life ended, a ghost put to rest. And the corporal felt the weight of the past pressing down on him, the desert alive with memory and vengeance. The figures pressed closer, their speed unnatural. The corporal ducked as one lunged past his cover. He could hear the wind carrying, faint metallic clinks and echoes of bullets that were never fired but imagined. She fired again, the barrel kicking under her steady hands, and the figure crumpled exactly where it had moved. The men behind him whispered names in disbelief, their faces pale. Wren did not speak. She simply tracked the next one, calculating angles, velocities and wind shifts invisible to everyone else. He noticed the metal once more, glinting in the moonlight against her chest, a reminder of every mission, every impossible shot. Every life taken or saved. Her calm was a storm, restrained a force measured and lethal. The shadows surged from both sides, moving with intent, as if the desert itself was testing her limits. But she did not hesitate. She fired again, and again, every round. A perfect echo of her past. The corporal realized that they were witnessing the culmination of everything she had endured. Every operation, every bullet counted on the desert scale. Suddenly the ground trembled faintly beneath. Their boots, the wind picking up, carrying a deeper metallic resonance. The men froze, looking to Wren for direction. She adjusted the scope, a finger tracing the barrel. The shadows halted for a moment, shifting slightly, as if aware of the tremor. Then, moved faster than before, the corporal shouted to fall back. But she raised a hand, signaling hold. She had predicted this already, and her calm did not falter. The desert was alive, and she was part of it. The first row of figures surged forward, a wave of unnatural precision. The corporal fired instinctively, but his bullets struck nothing. One of the men fell back, tripping over the sand. Wren fired the Barrett, a single shot, a thunderclap in the night. The figure stopped mid-stride and crumpled. The desert seemed to exhale, but more shapes pressed forward. Her next shots ringing out in rhythm, controlled, devastating, calculated, and unstoppable. The corporal's heart pounded in his chest. He had never seen anything like this before. He watched. The sun was already burning low over the desert sands, the heat rising in waves that distorted the horizon. The corporal squinted through the dust and debris of the abandoned range. He had seen dozens of soldiers and operatives in his time, but none had moved through the smoke and ruin like she did. The small figure of the woman approached, carrying nothing but a backpack and calm that made the chaos around her seem slower. He watched her step over broken crates and spent shell casings her boots. Barely making a sound, the corporal smirked, thinking she looked out of place like a visitor lost among hardened warriors. He called out her attention, caught immediately, and she stopped, turned slowly, her eyes sharp and calculating, not a hint of fear, her posture steady, as if she had done this before 1,000 times, he thought. The corporal reached down to hand her the M82, the massive rifle, heavy and unwieldy in normal hands, jammed. As it was, he expected hesitation or a strained attempt to lift it, but instead she took it with ease, lifting the weapon as though it weighed nothing, adjusting the bipod and checking the sights. her fingers brushing over the surface as if greeting an old friend. The corporal's smirk faded into something, harder to name curiosity mixed with disbelief. He studied the scars on her knuckles, the small cuts and healed burns faint. But telling the story of countless battles fought with precision and patience, he had handed rifles to rookies and veterans alike. But the way she handled the jammed M82 was different. Every movement fluid, deliberate, the kind of rhythm that only comes from a lifetime of practice and pain. She tested the trigger, carefully noting the jam, but her eyes did not waver. Scanning. "The targets beyond the dunes," she muttered under her breath. Numbers and distances like a soft chant. The corporal leaned closer, trying to hear, but she stopped him with a sharp glance, a warning that she did not need assistance, that she was not here. For approval, he watched silently as she prepared the weapon for a shot. She did not aim at any target, the barrel pointing low. The weight of the gun balanced perfectly across her shoulder. The desert stretched endlessly, and the wind carried faint. Echoes of previous operations, the corporal could feel something in the air, as if the sand itself remembered past missions, as if the ghosts of soldiers lost lingered in the shimmer of heat and dust. He felt a chill despite the burning sun. Her presence commanded the space around her, her calm concentration turning the ruined range into a theater of anticipation. He noticed the metal first as she shifted the M82 from shoulder to lap. It caught the light glinting faintly, her hands steady as they traced the worn edges, the number engraved into it, faint but unmistakable. 305 kills the corporal. Froze, his eyes narrowing at the precision of the engraving, the record of lethality staring back at him. She looked up, meeting his gaze, and for the first time he saw a flicker of acknowledgement in her eyes, a silent challenge. The wind picked up, scattering sand across spent rounds and shattered crates. The corporal felt the world shrink down to the two of them, the rifle and the metal, the aura of experience and danger that surrounded her, like a storm about to break. He wanted to ask about the kills, about the missions. But something in her expression told him that questions would come later, or perhaps never. He took a cautious step forward, the shadows of the destroyed buildings stretching long and angular across the sand. The corporal felt the weight of anticipation building his heart, racing not from fear, but from the realization that this was no ordinary operative, no rookie and no casual visitor. This was someone who had walked through fire and come out alive, and every scar, metal, and motion told the story. She adjusted the bipod again, her eyes scanning the horizon. The corporal noticed the faint tremor in the sand, some natural, he thought. But it could have been her presence alone, shifting the particles around them. The heat shimmered off the metal surfaces. The air hung thick with dust and possibility. He swallowed hard, waiting for a signal, waiting for her to show the skill that matched the metal he had seen records before, but they had never come to life in front of him. The corporal handed her the ammo, and she slid around into the chamber, her hands moving like clockwork, every motion perfectly. Synchronized, the jam cleared with a flick of the wrist and a soft click that echoed like a promise. The desert was silent for a heartbeat. Then she tested the trigger once, and the weapon spoke louder than any words, hitting a distant target almost. Beyond sight, the corporal blinked. The round had landed, precise, accurate, and devastating. He stepped back, his smirk gone, replaced with a mix of awe and disbelief. He had seen talent, but this was beyond measurement. She looked at him then, and her eyes held nothing but focus and history, a weight of experience too heavy for words. The metal gleamed in the sun again, and he realized that each of those 305 kills had been earned one by one in missions that none of them could imagine. And as the wind swept across the desert carrying sand and echoes of distant pasts, he knew this was only the beginning of a story that would test everything. He thought he knew about skill, patience, and survival, and he swallowed hard, wondering silently if anyone could survive the storm she carried within her. The desert heat pressed down on the range as the corporal followed her across the broken sand and twisted metal. She moved with the same calm precision as before, every step measured, every glance calculated, and he could feel the weight of her presence settling over the men around him. They were all experienced soldiers, yet even they hesitated, watching her handle the rifle with ease and confidence, the jam forgotten under her hands. As if it had never existed, she set the M82 down carefully, then pulled a small notebook from her backpack, flipping it open, pages worn and creased. The corporal crouched nearby, curious but cautious. He could see numbers, distances, coordinates, and notes about wind and elevation, but there was more. Her handwriting neat, yet hurried a record of targets and shots all marked meticulously. She did not look up when he reached for the notebook. She glanced at him briefly, then back down the page. Her attention absolute. The men were moving their rifles to positions as she pointed out distant markers beyond the range their targets set up for training. But she ignored them. Instead, she measured the horizon, counting distances, whispering to herself small calculations. That seemed impossible. He tried to follow the numbers in his head, but they defied everything he knew about physics and bullets and trajectory. He felt a chill as he realized that what she was doing could not be taught, only remembered. She picked up the Barrett again, her hands steady, her eyes narrowing through the scope. She did not take aim, yet she pressed her finger lightly on the trigger. The corporal watched as the first shot rang out, echoing across the desert. The target flipped slightly, a faint dust cloud rising. She shook her head in disbelief. The round had hit farther than the furthest target marker they had ever used, and it was not a lucky shot. The precision was deliberate, calculated, perfect. The men exchanged glances, a mixture of awe and disbelief. The corporal stepped closer, his voice low, trying to hide the tremor. "Did you make that shot?" She did not respond, only adjusted her stance and fired again each round, finding the distant marks as though the rifle were an extension of her body. She worked methodically, slow and steady, a rhythm that held the desert itself in suspense. He realized that each shot told a story. Every number in her notebook had been earned, one target at a time, one mission at a time. He could not stop, staring at the metal glinting in the sunlight. 305 kills etched into it, a lifetime of precision and death. His mind tried to reconcile the calm expression on her face with the power behind each shot. It was impossible, and yet there was no mistake, no luck, nothing but skill and memory, and perhaps something else he did not name. A sudden wind kicked up sand around them. The men shielding their eyes, the corporal noticed her hand steadying the rifle, despite the blast of heat. And shifting air, she adjusted for wind, drift, angle, and distance, calculating. In seconds, the impossible numbers, her eyes locked on a distant ridge, a place they could barely see. Yet she spoke softly to herself. "The distance is right. The wind will carry it exactly." The corporal frowned at the ridge, a chill crawling up his spine. He did not want to believe what she was about to attempt, yet he could see the determination in her stance. She mounted the bipod, leveled the rifle, and measured her breathing. The desert seemed to pause around her. The men held their collective breath as the first round vanished into the horizon. Seconds passed, the echo of the impact returning, distant but distinct, he felt. His heart thump in disbelief. She fired again and again, each shot finding targets he could not see, each one leaving the men frozen as if witnessing something sacred. The corporal stepped forward, finally unable to hold back his question. "How far are you?" She looked at him for the first time, fully eyes sharp, and measured 3,247 meters. She said quietly, and the silence that followed made him stagger, the number impossible. Yet he had heard it spoken calmly as fact. He wanted to ask how, but her gaze cut into him, silent and deadly. She did not explain. She simply reloaded and fired again. The wind whipped the sand around them, masking the sound of the rifles, and carrying faint echoes of bullets striking invisible. Targets, the men whispered to one another, incredulous, none daring to move too close too fast. She had become more than a soldier. She was a force. The corporal realized that every kill marked on that medal was not a